She seemed perfect in the beginning. Too perfect. The woman who shared her deepest secrets on the second date, who made you feel like the most important man in the world, who convinced you that you'd found your soulmate. She was running a psychological operation designed to capture your mind, exploit your vulnerabilities, and systematically destroy your sense of reality. This isn't about bad relationships or communication problems. This is about predatory psychological warfare conducted by women who use intimacy as a weapon and love as a manipulation tactic. The female covert narcissist represents the most dangerous type of psychological predator because she appears to be the victim while orchestrating your destruction. She seems vulnerable while being ruthlessly calculating. She appears to need your protection while systematically dismantling your psychological defenses. But here's what makes her so devastating. She doesn't just want to hurt you, she wants to own you. She wants to transform you from an independent man into a psychological slave who exists solely to manage her emotions and validate her inflated self-image. And she has a playbook of psychological weapons specifically designed to achieve this transformation. The covert narcissist's first weapon is weaponized vulnerability. She shares intimate secrets, traumatic experiences, and deep emotional wounds remarkably early in the relationship. This isn't genuine openness, it's strategic manipulation designed to create artificial intimacy and bypass your natural psychological defenses. The vulnerability trap works because it exploits men's protective instincts and desire for meaningful connection. When she shares her pain, you feel honored by her trust and motivated to heal her wounds. This creates instant emotional investment and psychological obligation that she'll leverage throughout the relationship. But here's the crucial difference between authentic vulnerability and strategic manipulation. Genuine vulnerability creates mutual openness and emotional safety. Weaponized vulnerability creates one-sided responsibility and emotional debt. She gets to be complex and damaged while you get to be strong and healing. The covert narcissist doesn't share her struggles to build connection. She shares them to establish control. Every secret becomes leverage she can use against you later. Every trauma becomes justification for her abusive behavior. Every wound becomes a reason you need to accommodate her unreasonable demands. This creates a psychological dynamic where you become responsible for healing damage you didn't create, while receiving no emotional support for your own struggles. You're not building a relationship, you're accepting a position as her unpaid therapist with unlimited responsibility and no authority. The vulnerability trap is complete when you find yourself walking on eggshells around her emotional triggers while she shows no consideration for yours. She's transformed from the wounded woman you wanted to protect into the wounded weapon that's destroying your peace of mind. Once the vulnerability trap is set, the covert narcissist begins the systematic application of intermittent reinforcement, the same psychological mechanism that makes gambling addictive. She provides just enough positive interaction to maintain hope, while ensuring that her approval remains unpredictable and scarce. The cycle begins with love bombing, overwhelming you with attention, affection, and validation that feels intoxicating after years of emotionally unavailable women. She makes you feel like the most important man in the world, like you've finally found someone who truly appreciates you. Then comes the devaluation phase, where the same woman who worshipped you begins finding fault with everything you do. The man she couldn't live without becomes the man who can't do anything right. The relationship that felt perfect becomes a constant source of stress and confusion. But here's what makes this cycle so psychologically devastating. Just when you're ready to give up, she provides just enough positive reinforcement to reignite hope. A loving gesture, a passionate encounter, a moment of the connection you remember, just enough to convince you that the good version of her is still there. This creates psychological addiction to her approval that operates below conscious awareness. Your brain begins craving the neurochemical rewards of her positive attention while developing tolerance for her negative behavior. You start working harder for smaller amounts of validation, like a gambler chasing increasingly rare wins. The intermittent reinforcement cycle is designed to keep you psychologically off balance and emotionally dependent. You never know which version of her you'll encounter, so you constantly adjust your behavior trying to predict and control her responses. The cycle is complete when you've reorganized your entire life around managing her emotional states. You've become addicted to solving the puzzle of her moods, convinced that if you can just find the right combination of words and actions, you can bring back the woman you fell in love with. The covert narcissist manufactures drama and conflict when none exist because emotional chaos serves multiple psychological functions for her. It generates the attention she craves, tests your boundaries, and keeps you in a constant state of defensive reaction. Passive aggression allows her to attack you while maintaining plausible deniability. She can claim she wasn't being hostile while systematically undermining your peace of mind through subtle provocations, indirect insults, and manufactured misunderstandings. The pattern typically involves her creating problems through ambiguous behavior, then punishing you for not reading her mind correctly. She'll be upset about something she won't explain, angry about rules she never communicated, or disappointed by expectations she never expressed. When you try to address the apparent problem, she denies there is one while simultaneously punishing you for not solving it. This creates a psychological double bind, where you're responsible for fixing issues you're not allowed to acknowledge exist. But here's what makes passive aggression so psychologically destructive. It trains you to become hypervigilant about her emotional states, while teaching you that your own emotions don't matter. You learn to monitor her moods constantly while suppressing your natural reactions to her provocations. The passive aggression factory is designed to keep you in a perpetual state of anxiety and confusion. You never know what might set her off, so you begin censoring your thoughts, controlling your expressions, and modifying your behavior to avoid triggering her unpredictable reactions. This psychological conditioning transforms you from a confident man into an anxious people pleaser who's constantly walking on eggshells around the person who's supposed to love and support you. The covert narcissist has developed sophisticated defense mechanisms that make her immune from criticism, accountability, or responsibility for her behavior. No matter what she does, it's never her fault, and attempting to hold her accountable only provides more evidence of your inadequacy. When you try to discuss problems in the relationship, she immediately deflects by turning the conversation into an attack on your character. Your legitimate concerns become evidence of your negativity, your emotional needs become proof of your neediness, and your boundaries become signs of your selfishness. The deflection shield operates through several predictable patterns, minimizing the impact of her behavior, denying that events happened the way you remember them, rationalizing her actions through her past trauma, and redirecting blame toward your reactions rather than her actions. She's trained herself to view any criticism as persecution, and any accountability as victimization. From her perspective, she's always the injured party regardless of what she's done. This allows her to maintain her inflated self-image while avoiding the psychological discomfort of genuine self-reflection. But here's what makes the deflection shield so psychologically damaging. It trains you to doubt your own perceptions and blame yourself for problems you didn't create. You begin questioning whether your concerns are legitimate, whether your memory is accurate, and whether you're being unreasonable. The deflection shield is complete when you find yourself apologizing for bringing up her behavior and taking responsibility for her emotional reactions. You've been conditioned to protect her from accountability while accepting responsibility for everything wrong in the relationship. This dynamic transforms healthy conflict resolution into psychological abuse, where you're always wrong and she's always the victim, regardless of what actually happened. The covert narcissist carefully catalogues your emotional vulnerabilities, past traumas, and deepest insecurities so she can weaponize them against you during conflicts. The same wounds you trusted her to help heal become the weapons she uses to inflict maximum psychological damage. During the love bombing phase, she encouraged you to share your past relationships, family problems, professional insecurities, and personal fears. She positioned herself as understanding and supportive, someone who would never use your vulnerabilities against you. But once the devaluation phase begins, those same vulnerabilities become her primary arsenal for emotional warfare. Your past rejections become evidence of your unlovability, your family problems become proof of your dysfunction, and your insecurities become justification for her treatment of you. The emotional exploitation system is particularly devastating because it violates the fundamental trust that intimate relationships require. The person who promised to protect your heart becomes the person who deliberately attacks it using inside information. This creates profound psychological trauma that extends beyond the relationship. You learn that emotional openness leads to exploitation, that vulnerability is dangerous, and that trusting others with your deepest self results in betrayal and pain. But here's the most insidious aspect of emotional exploitation. She uses your own emotions against you while remaining completely detached from hers. When you react to her attacks, She uses your emotional response as evidence of your instability, weakness, or irrationality. The exploitation system trains you to suppress your authentic emotional responses while accepting increasingly abusive treatment. You learn that having feelings makes you vulnerable to attack, so you begin shutting down emotionally to protect yourself. The covert narcissist creates psychological scenarios where you cannot succeed regardless of what you choose. Every option leads to criticism, every decision proves your inadequacy, and every response provides evidence of your fundamental wrongness. The no-win scenario works by presenting you with false choices where both options serve her agenda. If you engage with her drama, you're being aggressive. If you withdraw from conflict, you're being avoidant. If you try to solve her problems, you're being controlling. If you don't try to help, you're being selfish. This creates a psychological trap where your natural responses become evidence of your character flaws. You can't win because the game is rigged to ensure your failure regardless of how you play. The no-win scenario serves multiple functions. It proves her superiority by demonstrating your inadequacy, it justifies her treatment of you by providing evidence of your wrongness, and it trains you to doubt your own judgment and decision-making abilities. But here's what makes no-win scenarios so psychologically destructive. They teach you that your choices don't matter and that your efforts are worthless. You begin to believe that you're fundamentally incapable of doing anything right, which destroys your confidence and motivation. The no-win scenario generator is complete when you stop making decisions independently and start seeking her approval for every choice. You've learned that your judgment is flawed and that she's the only reliable source of direction in your life. This psychological conditioning transforms you from a decisive man into a helpless dependent who can't function without her guidance and approval. The covert narcissist systematically destroys your self-esteem by constantly comparing you unfavorably to other men, past relationships, and impossible standards. No matter what you do, it's never enough because she's comparing you to idealized fantasies rather than realistic expectations. The comparison torture chamber operates through several mechanisms: comparing your romantic gestures to more elaborate displays she's seen online, comparing your financial contributions to wealthier men she knows, comparing your physical appearance to more attractive men she encounters, and comparing your emotional availability to fictional standards she's created. These comparisons serve to keep you in a constant state of inadequacy and competition. You're not being evaluated based on your actual worth, you're being measured against impossible standards designed to ensure your failure. The covert narcissist doesn't make these comparisons to inspire improvement, she makes them to maintain psychological control. When you feel inadequate, you work harder to prove your worth. When you feel replaceable, you become more accommodating to keep her interested. But here's what makes comparison torture so psychologically devastating. It trains you to view yourself through her critical lens, rather than developing your own sense of self-worth. You begin measuring your value by her standards rather than your own accomplishments and character. The comparison torture chamber is complete when you've internalized her critical voice and begun comparing yourself unfavorably to other men even when she's not around. You've learned to see yourself as inadequate regardless of your actual achievements or qualities. This psychological conditioning destroys your natural confidence and creates chronic insecurity that extends far beyond your relationship with her. The covert narcissist transforms your relationship from a partnership into a performance evaluation, where she constantly grades your efforts and finds them lacking. Every interaction becomes an audition where you're performing for an audience that can never be satisfied. The performance evaluation system operates through constant feedback about your inadequacy, rating your romantic efforts on numerical scales, expressing disappointment with your gift choices, criticizing your conversation skills, evaluating your sexual performance, and comparing your efforts to those of other men. This creates a psychological dynamic where you're constantly auditioning for approval rather than engaging in genuine connection. You're not sharing experiences with a partner, you're performing for a critic who's determined to find fault. The evaluation system serves to maintain psychological dominance by positioning her as the judge of your worth while exempting her from similar scrutiny. She gets to evaluate while you get to be evaluated. She gets to criticize while you get to be criticized. But here's what makes performance evaluation so psychologically destructive. It transforms love from acceptance into achievement. You learn that you must earn approval through performance rather than receiving it through authentic connection. The performance evaluation system is complete when you've internalized her standards and begun evaluating yourself according to her criteria. You judge your own worth based on her satisfaction levels, rather than your own values and accomplishments. This psychological conditioning transforms you from someone who gives love freely into someone who performs for approval constantly. The covert narcissist establishes elaborate boundaries for herself while systematically violating yours. Her needs are sacred and non-negotiable, while your boundaries are selfish obstacles to be overcome through manipulation and guilt. The boundary violation protocol operates through several mechanisms, demanding instant access to your time and attention while being unavailable when you need her, requiring detailed explanations of your activities while providing vague accounts of hers, expecting unlimited emotional support while offering minimal reciprocity, and establishing rules for you that don't apply to her. This creates a psychological hierarchy where her comfort takes priority over your boundaries. Your preferences become optional while hers become mandatory. Your needs become selfish while hers become sacred. The boundary violation serves to establish psychological dominance and test your willingness to enforce limits. Each successful violation teaches her that your boundaries are negotiable, and that she can override them through persistent pressure. But here's what makes boundary violation so psychologically devastating. It teaches you that your needs don't matter, and that maintaining boundaries makes you selfish. You begin prioritizing her comfort over your own well-being. The boundary violation protocol is complete when you've stopped setting boundaries altogether and begun anticipating her needs while ignoring your own. You've learned that keeping her happy is more important than protecting yourself. This psychological conditioning transforms you from someone who maintains healthy limits into someone who sacrifices everything for someone else's comfort. The covert narcissist's ultimate weapon is the systematic destruction of your independent identity and its replacement with a version of yourself that exists solely to serve her emotional needs. You're not allowed to have thoughts, feelings, or preferences that don't revolve around her. The Identity Destruction Project operates through gradual isolation from your support systems, discouragement of your independent interests, criticism of your personal values, and replacement of your goals with hers. You slowly lose connection to the person you were before meeting her. This process is so gradual that you don't notice it happening until you look in the mirror one day and don't recognize the person staring back. The confident man who had his own life has been replaced by an anxious people-pleaser who exists solely to manage someone else's emotions. The identity destruction serves multiple functions. It makes you completely dependent on her for validation and direction. It eliminates your ability to maintain perspective on the relationship, and it ensures that you have no independent identity to return to if you leave. But here's what makes identity destruction so psychologically devastating. It erases your sense of self so completely that you forget who you were before the relationship. You can't imagine existing without her, because you've forgotten how to exist as yourself. If you're recognizing these weapons being used against you, if this analysis is revealing the systematic nature of what you thought was just a difficult relationship, I encourage you to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Understanding these psychological weapons is the first step toward protecting yourself from predators who use love as a manipulation tactic. These 10 weapons don't operate in isolation. They work together as part of a comprehensive psychological warfare strategy designed to transform you from an independent man into a dependent servant. Each weapon supports and reinforces the others in a systematic assault on your mental and emotional autonomy. The vulnerability trap creates initial dependency that makes you invested in her emotional well-being. The intermittent reinforcement cycle creates addiction to her approval that keeps you hooked despite increasing abuse. The passive aggression factory keeps you off balance and defensive. The deflection shield prevents you from holding her accountable while training you to blame yourself. The emotional exploitation system weaponizes your deepest vulnerabilities against you. The no-win scenario generator ensures you can never succeed in her estimation. The comparison torture chamber destroys your self-worth by measuring you against impossible standards. The performance evaluation system transforms love into labor. The boundary violation protocol establishes her dominance over your autonomy. The Identity Destruction Project completes the transformation by erasing who you used to be and replacing it with someone who exists solely to serve her needs. This isn't random abusive behavior. It's a sophisticated psychological operation designed to achieve specific outcomes. Your complete psychological dependency, your total emotional servitude, and your permanent subjugation to her will. Understanding why these psychological weapons are so effective requires recognizing that they exploit fundamental vulnerabilities in male psychology that evolved over millions of years. Men are biologically programmed to protect women, solve problems, and earn approval through performance, all vulnerabilities that covert narcissists weaponize. The vulnerability trap works because men are programmed to respond protectively to female distress. The intermittent reinforcement cycle works because men are programmed to persist in the face of challenges. The performance evaluation system works because men are programmed to earn status through achievement. These psychological weapons are effective precisely because they hijack natural male instincts and redirect them towards serving her agenda. Your biological programming to protect and provide becomes the mechanism of your psychological enslavement. But here's the crucial insight. Understanding these biological vulnerabilities allows you to recognize when they're being exploited. When you know what psychological buttons she's trying to push, you can choose not to respond according to her script. The covert narcissist depends on your unconscious reactions to her manipulations. When you become conscious of her weapons and your vulnerabilities, her power over you begins to dissolve. The first step in protecting yourself from covert narcissist weapons is learning to recognize them while they're being deployed, rather than only understanding them in retrospect. This requires developing awareness of your own psychological patterns and reactions. When you feel yourself walking on eggshells, constantly apologizing, or working harder for less appreciation, you're likely experiencing psychological warfare. When you find yourself doubting your own perceptions, accepting blame for things you didn't do, or feeling responsible for someone else's emotions, you're under attack. The key to breaking free is understanding that you cannot reason with psychological warfare. You cannot communicate your way out of systematic manipulation. You cannot love someone into treating you with respect. The only effective response to psychological warfare is strategic disengagement. You must stop participating in her games, stop responding to her manipulations, and stop trying to solve problems she's creating to control you. This requires developing what psychologists call emotional sovereignty, the ability to maintain your own emotional center regardless of what she does. When you stop needing her approval, her weapons lose their power over you. Recovery also requires rebuilding the identity she systematically destroyed. You must reconnect with who you were before the relationship, rediscover your own values and interests, and rebuild connections with people who knew you before she began her psychological assault. Understanding covert narcissist weapons isn't about becoming paranoid or cynical about relationships. It's about developing the psychological sophistication necessary to distinguish between authentic connection and sophisticated manipulation. The covert narcissist represents one extreme on the spectrum of human psychological functioning. Most women are capable of genuine love, authentic vulnerability, and healthy relationships. But the small percentage who weaponize intimacy can cause devastating psychological damage to men who don't understand their tactics. This knowledge matters because it protects you from wasting years of your life trying to love someone who's incapable of loving you back. It prevents you from sacrificing your mental health for relationships that can never become genuinely fulfilling. More importantly, understanding psychological warfare helps you appreciate authentic love when you encounter it. When you know what manipulation looks like, you can better appreciate partners who actually support your growth rather than systematically undermining it. The choice is yours. You can continue accepting whatever treatment others offer because you don't understand the difference between love and psychological warfare. Or you can develop the awareness that protects you from predators who use intimacy as a weapon. One path leads to psychological destruction disguised as love. The other leads to genuine relationships built on mutual respect and authentic connection. The difference isn't luck or circumstances, it's knowledge and courage. Choose wisely. Your psychological sovereignty depends on it.